of the agenda and consent items?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, thumbs up. Opposed? It carries. Public comment. Rick?
We do not have anybody in attendance tonight. No attendees.
Darn. We're not drawing them in lately. Okay. Commission member reports. Gail, anything?
No, I just narrowly escaped the tsunami, so I'm just back from the beach. Was
I
touching.
see that, and it looks like there's a wave coming in right
Yeah,
behind
right.
you.
Yeah. It was very scary.
It looks like it.
We couldn't see it.
Yeah. Karen? Karen, I know you have a report.
Yes, I was very excited to be able to attend the city council. I like to go to those meetings, so I believe it was on the 6th to watch Andy Ryder be re-elected as mayor and Malcolm Miller as our deputy mayor. And I also went to the History Talks presentation with Dr. Thelma Jackson, and it was amazing to hear the history of the region. They've been working on a book, The History of Blacks in Thurston County from 1950 to 1975, and to see the history of even though, you know, this region was founded by the Bush family and was very diverse, and the history that people of color were really forced out of the surrounding cities, and Lacey was a safe haven to people of color and Blacks in this region, and that we have such a strong history of inclusion and reaching out. And I think that having our deputy mayor being a man of color and having other leaders in our community here, it's really heartwarming to see that we're doing that work on equity and inclusion in our city. So that was just really heartwarming, and I need to go buy that book and learn more about the history of our region.
Great. Thank you. Mark?
No report.
All righty. And then we have Daphne.
No report, but I want to thank you, Carrie, and that's nice. I like your passion about that. Thanks for attending and sharing that. That's nice. Thank you.
Peg?
I also attended that meeting, and I share some of Karen's views and joy about the diversity that's happening and the people that are continuing on. And our own Robin is on the board or on the commission now, so council, excuse me. I also attended the Lacey Chamber of Commerce meeting, and that was inspiring. And I've met a few business folks and introduced myself and told them we were interested in business and goings on. And I actually sat at a table with two people who had survived COVID, and neither one of them had been hospitalized, but I got to hear their story. So that was interesting.
Was that the one that they did their awards for businesses or something? Business awards? Yeah. Or their leader awards?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Jenny Heck was there and spoke.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. I also sat on the work session where they gave a presentation
the one that they
about
did their
Park.
awards? Boy, there's a delay.
Oh. So
Sorry,
anyway,
Peg.
QEO Park was discussed and presented, and it's so exciting. And city council are just really jazzed about it and want to move forward as quick as possible. So stay tuned.
All righty. Thank you, commissioners. Director's report?
Yes, just a couple of items. Again, just to keep the Planning Commission informed, we are recruiting for 2 additional members to join the Planning Commission. I believe we have 2 applications, possibly a 3rd application in, and we're looking to schedule interviews. We got a tentative date at the end of this month that we can get all the calendars to align. So hopefully by the end of this month, we'll have some new appointees being considered by council for the planning commission. Also, just for dates coming up, this Thursday night is the Lacey City Council meeting. On the agenda for that night are a couple of things that relate back to some of the planning commission work. One is we're dusting off the ordinances to amend our low density zones to consolidate them into one zone. Basically, this is work that the planning commission did about 2 years ago, I believe, or maybe 2.5 years ago, making a recommendation to combine those the low density 0 to 4 and the low density 3 to 6, allowing up to 6 units per acre in both zoning classifications, and then also allowing duplexes or triplexes on existing lots of records, and then potential remove the vested lot statute from a maximum building coverage of 50%. So basically consolidating our zone into one single family zone that also allows other types of housing, the duplexes, triplexes, and those kind of what's considered a little bit of the middle density. And then 2 other items on the agenda for Thursday night include a couple of interlocal agreements. One interlocal agreement is for phase 4 of the regional climate action work. It's to continue the work at the regional steering committee table supported by Thurston Regional Planning Council staff. And this is that work where at the regional level, we identifying various priorities, doing white paper studies, and setting up the monitoring and progress for our efforts on climate initiatives and reaching our goals established in the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And then the second interlocal agreement is related to that. One of the other things is we're going to be looking to study the effect of requiring all new development to be electrically sourced, basically phasing out natural gas for that new development. This is a topic that's come up quite a bit in the climate action discussions in the last couple of years. And before any policy action is taken, it's decided that we want to try to do a little deeper dive on what is that true impact of, or cost of implementing that type of policy in the area. And so there is a proposal that was originally initiated by Olympia. Tumwater, Thurston County, and Lacey are considering joining that effort to split the cost to have that study done. And council is going to consider that interlocal agreement Thursday night as well. Both these topics, both interlocal agreements that were presented to the council last Thursday's work session, and they're looking to move forward this Thursday night. And the final thing I have is I kind of touched upon it at the last meeting, but it's now official. We will be having a new planner joining our ranks and backfilling Jessica Brandt's position as a senior planner, and they'll be starting at the end of this month, joining our office. And I'll turn over to Ryan to kind of maybe give a quick highlight or overview of Hans and his background.
So as Rick mentioned, we have a new planner coming on board. This is actually a senior planner level position. So somebody that comes with a little bit more experience. Person's name is Hans Shepard. Hans is coming from SCJ Alliance, which is a private consulting firm here in town that does it's done a lot of private planning work on behalf of cities. So especially smaller jurisdictions, they contract with smaller jurisdictions. So he's got experience in other, Lewis counties and rural areas and small towns, done some work for Yelm. So they kind of do a lot of planning for smaller jurisdictions. So has a lot of that type of background, has a transportation background as well. So a master's degree in sustainable transportation, which is exciting, especially given, and we have our pedestrian bicycle plan and some other plans that are trying to push us in the right direction as far as multimodal transportation goes. And we have some challenges internally in doing that. And hopefully we can, use this position and leverage some of the experience there as well. So Hans starts on the 31st with all of these types of positions. It takes about 6 months to a year to fully understand the scope of kind of what they're walking into. And so, the Planning Commission will talk a little bit about this here in a little bit as far as your work program goes, but, our whole department work program is very broad and there's a lot of things going on all at the same time with a few amount of staff. And so, it'll take some time for Hans to come up to speed, but we're excited to get Jessica's position filled and get somebody on board.
And thank you, Ryan. And the only other thing is just to, again, remind you of the date, and we'll talk about a little bit later in the agenda, but the 27th, Thursday night, is our joint work session with City Council, and that's a 6 o'clock start. So a week from this Thursday, and 6 o'clock start, and I'll stop there and turn it back over to the chair.
Rick, I had one question first. Have you heard, I just was in some meetings and there was some talk about potential legislation in the state, through the state, in regards to housing and potentially working some rezoning, statewide rezoning for duplexes, triplexes, and are we in touch with whatever we need to be with?
We are, and we've been tracking the bill. I don't have the bill number off the top of my head, but we are working with our lobbyists for the city of Lacey. Really, that bill that's coming out is doesn't affect us too well, because we're moving forward with this lot consolidation amendment next week, or this Thursday. And basically, the tenets of it, if you're within 30 minutes of transit, you have to allow all sorts of middle density housing in single family zones. In cities of certain size, I think it's a population of 50,000 or more. For cities of 20,000 or more, you have to allow a certain level of duplexes and triplexes in all single family zones. And there's another tier below that for 10,000 population. And when we look at that, that language, it's really not something that's different or going to affect what is the Planning Commission's recommending to council to take action this next Thursday. So we wouldn't have a lot of effect. The only other thing is we're going to suggest is they try to figure out how to define, do we have a term in there for a housing type called stacked housing? And since there's no definition, it'd probably be the definition of the beholder. And I think that's one piece that probably should be defined.
Okay, was there another person that had a question?
Yeah, Daphne.
Yeah, and this is, sorry, Rick, after Dave's question was so much more, intellectual, but this natural gas thing, I can't help as a baker, but wondering why we're obviously environmentally, but is that something where, that's how I cook, and a lot of people that cook a lot or bake a lot, this is a preference for them. And so I just was wondering how that's being addressed, or if that's being considered. So,
and that's a great thought and point. And this is a topic that was identified in the climate action conversation as, in terms of the built environment having probably one of the larger emitters of carbon footprint. And so improving energy efficiencies and being off the, going onto the electrical grid was seen as could make good large strides towards achieving some of those climate reduction goals. But on the other hand, you have folks talk about just like that, what's the cost to development? What's the cost for operation and maintenance? That was probably what the center of that, the other side of the conversation was, but there's been really no studies other than probably you can find some, studies at other locations of what that affected, but really been no local study of what that looks like. And so that's why we're suggesting to ground that conversation of two points of view is how do we get more information about it? And one of the things that hasn't come up is, when they talk about cost of development and cost of operation, nobody's talked about, well, does that create a barrier for certain types of uses like you just referenced, Daphne? And one of the things we want to make sure that study encompasses is, does it affect restaurants? Are there other technologies that they can cook with? Or is that going to be something that's going to have to be considered through this policy decision? There's a lot of, in addition to the energy efficiency, a lot of change in how people do things would become about as this as well. It should be also part of that discussion and study. So that's why we're suggesting that we go through a study first before our policy decision was weighed. So the decision makers can have a little bit more information about it.
okay, thanks. Yeah, I can just say buying a home, if it didn't have natural gas for my stove, I might choose to buy elsewhere as a result. And I think so I just want that to hopefully be considered in the study and buyer preference for a residential home. So, okay, thank you.
It just so happens, Daphne, I was just in a meeting about some of this exact topic, and one of the concerns is infrastructure. Can the infrastructure that we presently have even handle the burden of it all becoming electric and removing, like maybe not using gas as much as we do? And of course, that's a whole nother study and a much bigger question, right?
And on that infrastructure, as the state's going to make a decision, are they going to time it when the infrastructure is ready? And then should local jurisdictions be early adopters if they are going to do that? Or wait, is this a state issue? Statewide issue, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Good discussions. We'll move on to new business. The work program, Ryan, it's up to you.
Got it. Give me a second to share my screen and here. I apologize in advance if my audio is funky. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it. I hear that maybe a new laptop might not be too far away. So hopefully that will take care of it. So yeah, we've got the joint meeting with the city council coming up. There we go. So we've got the joint meeting coming up a week from Thursday. So I believe that's the 27th, and the council now meets at 6 p.m. So a week from Thursday at 6 p.m. we'll be talking about the work program for the Planning Commission for the next year. In setting that up, we wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of a precursor, a little bit of information on specifically what the Planning Commission is going to be working on for the next year. The focus for the joint meeting really will be our department as a whole, kind of looking at all these things that our department does and highlighting those portions that will touch the Planning Commission, but really giving kind of a overall look at what our department does, so that the Planning Commission in particular, or excuse me, the City Council in particular has a kind of understanding of what all goes into our department work program that the Planning Commission is a part of. So I wanted to first touch on kind of the format of the presentation before I get into what the Planning Commission's work program is for this next year. So it's going to start out with a Community and Economic Development Department review. So we are in the midst of developing what we're calling a department dashboard. And this dashboard is a way to connect between programs and policies with what exactly is being implemented. And we're using a tool called Prezi. It's a presentation software that is essentially interactive, that you can click on little different parts of a presentation, which leads you to these individual implementation actions that come out of this. Good thing about this is not only can it be used for something like presentation at the joint meeting, but it could also be hosted on our city's website for a member of the public to get more information, onboarding a new employee to be able to see what it is that we all do in our department. It has a kind of a multi-layered aspect to it that we're excited to kind of use this as the impetus for kicking off this dashboard. Part of it, we're going to go through obviously what our stats are as a department, how many land use applications we're doing, how many permits are being reviewed, those kinds of things, but also touch on what we've been doing in long range planning and what's touched the Planning Commission in this last year. And these are large plans that you all have been involved in, and the City Council as well. So that's things like a recent adoption. This was part of our 2021 comprehensive plan amendments, adoption of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan, adoption of the urban forest management plan, the housing action plan, and working on some of our affordable housing implementation. As Rick mentioned, that will largely be taken care of at this next city council meeting, with some of our early adoption of our ordinance related to the low density zone consolidation, but also waiver of fees for low income units, and then as well the extension of the multifamily tax exemption. We wanted to really highlight the successes of our department over the last 5 years in adopting a lot of these policies. So in addition to those that we've got done in 2021, we also have, you know, some large plans that have been developed as well. But, you know, for the most part, they've kind of sat on the shelf. So that's things like our pedestrian bicycle plan, our depot district plan, some other plans that, you know, what we want to highlight is really 2022 is the year of implementation. We've done all these things. We've done, you know, the adoption of these big plans in the last year, and then these, you know, other plans within the last 5 years. Now 2022 is our opportunity to implement them. So I think I've mentioned this in the past, that you can expect that this next work program for the Planning Commission is going to be a little bit lighter than those in the past, not as many heavy lifts in terms of plans. A lot of it is because our department really needs to take the time to implement what we've been doing over the last 5 years in terms of these larger plans. Having said that, there are a number of work program items. So it's not to say that we're not going to be bringing anything to the Planning Commission. I think we've talked about in the past, maybe scaling down the number of our meetings. But we've got some private applications. The first is a rezone on Carpenter Road. So I will touch on these kind of one at a time. The Carpenter Road rezone is really the only one that the staff were recommending to move forward. The other two were not. We'll talk a little bit about those other two here in a little bit. So I'm actually going to share my screen and bring up a map of this property that's proposed for rezone. So annually, we do our annual comprehensive plan amendments. That includes things like site-specific rezones that amend our comprehensive plan and zoning map. And so we did receive one rezone application for property. This is off of Carpenter Road. So you can see the highlighted kind of green square there on your map. Martin Way is to the north, Pacific Avenue is to the south. You can kind of see Lake Lois on the south. So this is east side of Carpenter Road. I believe it's about a 5-acre piece of property. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. This property is currently right now undeveloped. It's mostly Doug fir trees, but you can see to the north, this is the Serenity Apartments. And the reason I like this map is because it actually shows, it's recent enough aerial photo, it actually shows those Serenity Apartments under construction. The challenge with this site right now, so you can see that there's the aerial photograph. Let's turn that off and bring up the zoning map. The challenge with this site is that it is essentially landlocked. So you can see that Carpenter Road is on that left-hand side, and there's very limited access to this piece of property. And let's see, it's highlighted, you can't really tell, but the zoning is low density 3 to 6 units per acre. So that's current zoning, low density 3 to 6, which that's essentially a single family subdivision. And with this property having little or no access onto Carpenter Road, it really makes it a challenge to develop it for single family subdivisions that are going to need to have essentially their own access to Carpenter Road. So the proposal by the applicant is to essentially extend, bring this back up here, extend this apartment concept from the north. Anyway, just imagine that there's an aerial photograph. Take this aerial or this this apartment complex and extend it further to the south. So really that's their proposal. So they're taking it from a low density 3 to 6. Their proposal is for a moderate density zoning designation. So it's got good utilities. It's got all those things. And, you know, obviously, you know, we'll need to do some public outreach. It's got a neighborhood immediately to the south, that Aldea Glen neighborhood. But from a, you know, from a kind of technical review standpoint, it meets all the criteria for this type of an upzone for this type of application. So any questions on this application while I've got the aerial photograph up? Anything anybody wants to see? I'm not exactly sure why the aerial isn't working right now.
So Ryan, is that an egress issue that they're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. So, sorry that the aerial photographs. Am I here? Let's see if, try this. Let's see if it'll reload. Carpenter Road has a curve in it there that is also kind of on a hill. And it's extremely difficult to be able to get access, especially when you're looking at like a single family subdivision in this area. So you can kind of see it a little bit better. So this little triangle piece of property here is not owned by the property owner. It's owned by, I believe, the Aldea Glen Homeowners Association, which is, Aldea Glen is to the south. So their only access is right here where my cursor is to Carpenter Road. Carpenter Road has a curve and a hill. And so when the property owner purchased this, they bought both pieces of property essentially together. And the idea would be then to extend this apartment complex to the south. In order to do that, they would need to be, they would need an upzone of this property.
Okay, thank you.
What are the access issues on this? You know, that's probably a tough left, and you know, it gets a decent amount of traffic to have a, you know, maybe a single entrance exit for a fairly large apartment complex. How viable is that?
Yeah, that really, I think what, you know, that would all have to kind of be worked out through our permitting process, as far as the, you know, the access spacing and the visibility through this corner. But really, you can kind of see here, I think the idea is that they would really be combining the two projects, and their access would be off of this already existing access point here on Carpenter. So it would be a much safer location. Essentially, all of the ingress egress would go through this northern property, because like I said, both the property owner owns both of these parcels. So when Carpenter Road was rebuilt, I don't know, what was that, 10 years ago or so, that we put in these kind of predefined access points. And so that access that you can see there kind of in the middle of your screen, that's across from that car, is already existing. This parcel down here has an access, but it was very limited. I think there was an old mobile home or something on this property. So it was just to provide access to that single piece of property. So something we'll have to kind of look at through the rezone process is, you know, what would access look like, but really it doesn't become defined, or, you know, we don't really look at those types of issues hard and fast until it hits the permitting stage.
Okay, it's just that's Martin and Carpenter is a really busy intersection with lots of traffic all the time. So
yeah, and Carpenter Road, especially through this curve, is a fast, you know, it's 4 lanes. It's a fast street.
thank you.
I think it's supposed to be 35, but I live nearby and people go faster. I wanted to
They do.
ask about the trees. Are there going to be trees go down for this?
Well, yeah, of course, you know, it's going to be, you know, if the rezone is successful, it's going to be required to be, you know, a higher density complex, which is going to require some removal of trees. But it's like with any project, there's, you know, requirements for a 5% tree tract. So they'll have to, you know, set aside 5% in, you know, retained trees. Look at our arborist will go out there and identify other trees that might be good candidates for retention as well. Site does have some elevation changes to it, so it might be a little bit difficult. It might require some significant amount of grading. That's something, again, that'll have to be addressed through the permitting process.
Thank you.
Yeah, makes sense.
Stop sharing my screen on that one. We'll come back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so let's move on to the next application. The next one is from an application from the Thurston Climate Action Team. And this is actually not a site-specific rezone, but an amendment to our comprehensive plan. And they are proposing amendments to our recently adopted urban forest management plan. These amendments are to, in their words, better align our urban forest management plan with the carbon sequestration goals of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. So Thurston Climate Action Team has said, because the city completed its update to its urban forest management plan largely before the climate mitigation plan was complete, that the two aren't necessarily in alignment. And so what they would like to do is look at better aligning climate goals with our urban forest management plan, which has been recently updated, as we talked about before. The challenge in doing this is that there's still a significant amount of work that is still underway in terms of we are in the third phase of the climate mitigation interlocal agreements that will establish kind of a white paper on region-wide carbon sequestration and what we might be able to do as a region, not only from kind of an urban standpoint, but a rural standpoint as well, because when it comes to implementation of our Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan, it's not just the cities that are implementing this, it's the rural area as well. And so, it's staff's opinion on this one that this is not an application that is yet ripe for consideration. Again, we've just adopted our urban forest management plan. We haven't even yet adopted the implementing regulations that are coming out of it or the amendments to our regulations. And so we feel like it's just too early to kind of wrap our head around what those amendments might be, given that we're so early after adoption of our urban forest management plan. The last one there is the third one is the mobile manufactured home zoning district. And this was submitted as a request to the council and not a specific docketing application. This was a request from property owners or manufactured home owners that live at the Mountain Green Mobile Home Park, which is located off Yelm Highway by the Walmart neighborhood market. They are concerned, and they've been in contact with their park ownership about this. They're concerned that their rents keep increasing and that at some point, because they don't own the underlying property in the park, they own the individual units, that somehow the park owner, increasing these rents will see that the property's highest and best use is not a manufactured home park for seniors. And so they may want to resell the property to a developer that might use the property for something else. When it comes to protections associated with existing manufactured homes, there are a very limited number of things that we as a city can do. One of them, however, is that we could look at establishing a manufactured home park district. And so what that would do is permit only mobile or manufactured homes in that zone. If you remember, if you've been around for a while, Tumwater did this probably about 10 years ago. They established their own manufactured home zoning district on their existing parks. This is, again, not a formal application, but one that we probably need to address with the council. It's something that we don't necessarily have the capacity to be able to do. I think there's some things that maybe we could work on initially to kind of grease the skids a little bit on an application like this. Things like, we don't have a good handle on an inventory of parks in our community. What's the age of the units within the parks? Those kinds of things that maybe we could look at doing early as a part of this, but feel like it's a little bit out of the scope and scale of our staff to be able to do this at this point, given so much that we have to work on this year. So what we'll talk about with the council is things that enter kind of like a parking lot, for lack of a better term, kind of something that sounds like a great idea, something that we should potentially explore in the future, but something we just don't have the capacity to do. And that's something that Rick and Grant will touch on as we move through the council presentation is, what does this look like in terms of our own capacity as, only having really 2 staff members being able to work on these things through the year. Is this something that maybe we do in the future, but have a consultant help us with, something like that?
So Ryan, if I could add to, we really want to take a look at this in the overall context of the housing action plan and some of the other recommendations for that. So we want to be thoughtful about how we implement certain things, and this may or may not be fit in with some of the other stuff that we're looking at the housing action plan. So we don't want to take everything individually and kind of spin our wheels on stuff. So want to get the most bang for our buck.
So I just have a sort of tangential question. Are we saying that something like that would be ordinance to prevent the property owner from making the highest and best use of his property at some point in the future?
That's the idea with the zone, is that it basically kind of puts it into a perpetual holding zone, as you will, that really the only use you can have in that area is a mobile or manufactured home park. And so
it sounds like a litigation festival to me.
Well, and part of that though is it'd be generally set up as a, if they want to change it and convert it to something else, they'd have to go through a comp plan amendment process. So, and have this bigger public process and council decision. That's how I think Tumwater set it up, is tied to, like, it's not a mobile home park forever. The applicant could go through that process, but it makes it a much more.
Makes it cumbersome.
Yes, that's probably the best word I could find. You found it for me.
It's I would wonder if that would survive much court action, but we'll see.
The Tumwater application did. So I think it went all the way to the Court of Appeals.
Did it really?
Yeah, and was successful. But you're right, it's got a lot of things associated with it. And something that comes to mind as well is that there are certainly different mobile or manufactured home parks around the cities in different quality of parks. The Mountain Green Park is really nice. There are others that are, substandard living conditions, no doubt about it. And something that, something like this may prevent those from being something else sometime in the future,
right,
something that's, would be a better place to live for people. So,
yeah. Thanks.
I just had a question or comment, I guess, Ryan, a little bit, but is this sort of the conundrum we face when these are situated near transit and services, and there is development and growth, that the land that has been manufactured homes or mobile homes becomes more valuable? And I think this is going to be a recurring thing or theme, like, we talk about the Martin Way corridor, as that becomes more valuable place to spend time or to do things, the land isn't going to be able to be associated, or owners aren't going to be associated with low rent, maybe less new mobile homes or manufactured homes. So is this kind of a future conundrum we're going to face as we develop these areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail right on the head as far as the challenge, that, we've done a lot to improve the community, and these, communities kind of built up around a lot of these older parks. What do we do about them? And they provide a significant affordable housing resource. In the case of Mountain Green, that's a, senior park that a lot of seniors on fixed incomes, live in, pay space rent, and that's, affordable to them. So, what do we do in terms of if they're relocated? There are some relocation assistance programs. That's more of a state level thing, but my understanding is that they're severely underfunded. And if somebody was relocated, you have to find another park for them to go and put their unit on, and those places are very limited. So there's a whole myriad of issues that we could uncover, but you're right, Daphne, that that's the issue with these parks, and that's the primary fear of the residents out there, is that they see all the growth and things happening around them and think, okay, well, are we next? Or what's going to happen? And it creates question in terms of their stability of housing.
Thank you.
Kieran,
did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. I had a question about, I thought I heard you say that the city was considering purchasing or providing a land to move or to designate that would be aside from where they currently were. Was that, or did I hear that part wrong?
are you referring to like RV encampments.
I wasn't sure. I thought that you were saying that there might be an area set aside by the parks where these mobile homes or manufactured homes could be moved to, or was that something different?
Ryan,
I talked about the relocation assistance program. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, so it'd be, that was part of the housing action plan then. So no, that was something a little bit different. I was just thinking about if there was land set aside and also the issues of sewer and septic, and I wasn't really sure how that was connected to the mobile homes or the manufactured home parks, and kind of seeing how all those different things were interrelated, but perhaps that's a different discussion.
yeah, I think with the relocation, there's been some regional conversations for like relocating RVs and cars that are being lived in as part of a safe parking program, and trying to identify publicly owned properties that could be conducive to that would have some of those utility services, and that you can have a safe spot for people to park those RVs versus what we have on Inside Road. And that is a different conversation. And with manufactured homes, the challenge with relocation or assistance, there's a couple of things. One is as Ryan mentioned, the state resource for relocation assistance underfunded. So there's not a lot of amount there. There's not many new manufactured home parks or subdivisions being created. So there's not a physical place necessary to go. And then a lot of these manufactured homes, once they're placed and been there for a few years, they cannot be just picked up and moved. There are some of the newer models maybe, but there's a lot of manufactured homes, or actually probably some homes out there still qualify as what the old definition of a mobile home, that you would not be able to relocate because they would not be able to survive the move. So it creates this little dilemma. And then, as you know, in terms of ownership, there's not many ownerships. A lot of the older mobile home parks are family trust or family owned, and once they want to move, sell that property, there's not many buyers out there, so it leaves them limited options of who could buy and maintain manufactured homes. So there's a lot of different pieces, as Ryan said, to this topic, and it's pretty meaty. That's what's challenged to try to take it on this year as a citywide application. There's going to be a lot of groundwork and study, and you're going to have a lot of engagement with both park residents as well as park ownership, and to try to get as much of a conversation around it so you don't have a polarized conversation at the end of the process. So there's going to be a lot of legwork and time to put into this.
All right. So let's maybe move on now to, so those were the 3 private applications. The next category is those that are city initiated, which is the lion's share of those things the Plan Commission will be working on. So the first one is the update to the stormwater manual. So this is already underway. You had Doug Christensen at your last meeting come and give you kind of an introductory briefing, and I think he'll be back at your next meeting to go over those draft amendments to the stormwater manual prior to starting to work through the public outreach process. I believe he said June 30th. I think we talked about June 30th was the deadline on that. An update to the water comprehensive plan. So each of our city utilities has utility comprehensive plans associated with them. So we have, obviously this water is due for an update. We also have sewer, stormwater, et cetera. Those are updated on a 5-year update schedule. We did have Brandon McAllister come and give you a precursor to that a few months ago, but that'll be coming forward for future review. If you remember, some of the recent things associated with this have been that have already started to be implemented. So this is more of a council level thing, but things like our water rates and those kinds of things. We've already got some capital projects that are scoped out on that water comp plan that are upcoming and part of why the city water rates were increased like they were. Next is Martin Way Corridor Study. We've had Thurston Regional Planning Council staff here to do some introductory briefings with you on the outcomes of that. So this again is the transportation and land use study of the Martin Way Corridor from essentially Pacific Avenue in Olympia all the way out to kind of Meridian, Deutero at the edge of the Lacey Urban Growth Area that will provide recommendations on not only transportation improvements, multimodal improvements, but bus rapid transit as well. So intercity transit is part of this study, and then land use recommendations. So we're doing things like looking at our zoning to make sure the zoning fits the vision of the corridor and those kinds of things. So that'll be something that'll be coming to you for review and recommendation by the end of the year. Next item is the multifamily / electric vehicle parking ordinance, which you have already made a recommendation on. So this is not something that's necessarily for you, but more for the city council. That is moving to the land use committee by the end of the month for review. I'm anticipating that this will be adopted by the city council next month. The other one on this list is the emergency housing ordinance. So again, very similar to the previous item where you've already made a recommendation. While it has been some time, this is our encampment ordinance that the Planning Commission has made a recommendation to the council on. The council has kind of put it on pause, providing the outcome of the community group on homelessness. So my understanding is those recommendations will be coming out here soon, and there may be some adjustments or tweaks that we might need to make to that emergency housing ordinance that might be coming back to the Planning Commission, but at this point it's a little too early to tell. Any questions on this slide before I move on to the next one? Any of these city initiatives that anybody has questions on? Okay.
Yeah, I've got a question. This is
Yeah,
Mark. When those recommendations from the homeless committee come out, how's that going to be presented?
Rick maybe can give a better.
We're looking at, so where we are in the process, we just finished the last virtual open house, and we're putting together the final report from that feedback from the virtual open house. And we're going to present that report to the work group at a meeting at the end of February. And that's hopefully going to be our final work group meeting to endorse a draft plan that we can present formally to the council. We are looking at potentially on their work session, council work session on February 10th of doing a briefing and update with the council with several members of our work group. And we may or may not have the draft document at that point in time, but at least we'll have the draft strategies there, the framework of it, as well as results of the open house. But ultimately, once we have that final work group meeting, then we'll be releasing the draft for people to review before council takes a final action on either accepting the plan or however they decide to move forward with that plan recommended by the work group. So we're looking at mid-February to mid-March range is when that will come out.
Thank you.
All right, so I think this is the last slide. A few more that we have that will also hit the Planning Commission and city initiatives. First is on this slide is parks update to our parks plan. So we do an update to our parks plan about every 6 years. This will be reviewed by the Planning Commission, but not made formal until 2023. The major parts of this plan that I'm aware of that are going to be subject to update is that we have will have a new master plan for a new park in Lacey. The Cuyo Park will be a part of this parks plan update. It'll also update our demographic information and level of service information like we've done with other parks plan updates as well. Next one is the low density residential comprehensive plan amendment. So we're taking to council on Thursday the zoning text amendment, which will amend our zoning text to combine our two low density residential zones. In order to kind of close the loop on this, we actually need to amend our comprehensive plan as well to only state that we have one low density zone, which we will hopefully after Thursday. So we'll need to amend the actual comprehensive plan document to reflect that. The other thing is we'll need to do a large amendment to our zoning map, because right now we have kind of two shades of yellow: low density 0 to 4, low density 3 to 6 for our low density residential. We'll actually need to combine those into one. So it's a bit of a housekeeping amendment on both sides, on the comp plan side and on the map side, to rectify that low density zone consolidation zoning text amendment. Then the other one here is the capital facilities plan update. So we are in the midst right now. Actually, we've hired a consultant and signed a contract to complete a major update to our capital facilities plan. So as the Plan Commission, I think, is aware at this point, if you've been involved in past reviews of our capital facilities plan, we have a capital facilities plan that is quite long in the tooth. It's I think originally was done in 1993 by Steve Kirkman, who was an intern at the time, who has now retired from the city of Lacey. So that tells you how long it's been kind of, redone over and over again. So the good news with this is that it kind of twofold. Number one is that it will give us a new document, a new template that we can use for future iterations of our capital facilities plan update process. The second thing will be that it will also do a comprehensive look at our city facilities and will kind of program out how those facilities grow as our community grows. So the focus really is going to be on kind of two primary facilities. One is the City Hall complex, how that will grow over time. The second will be our maintenance shop and maintenance and operation shop that's at College Street and Lacey Boulevard, how that can grow. They're got some limited space, some space constraints on that, but also things like that are maybe a kind of, so those are the two primary facility plans that will come out of this. There'll also be kind of lesser facilities that, things like the Lacey Community Center, how will that grow? Our senior center, our library, those kinds of facilities that also need to expand when our community expands. And so it'll program out space needs over the next 20 years for all of those types of facilities. It's just underway. This is a process that will take the entire year. Our hope is that it'll be adopted by the council in December. So this will be something that'll come to the Planning Commission for review. It'll really be for the Planning Commission. This is a little bit, you're kind of on the outside of this looking in a little bit because the city council is really going to be the body because they have the budgeting authority and decision-making authority over our city facilities that there we'll have more touch points with the council on this than we will with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will be doing the public outreach and holding the formal public hearing and doing the review at the end of the process. So it's really a staff-led, director-led process throughout with touches on the council and then the Planning Commission and on the outside. So with that, that's what I have to talk about as far as what's going to hit the Plan Commission. Be happy to take any questions or comments. Talk about anything else that I might have missed. Looks like Gail has her hand up.
Yeah, I just have a question. I assume that the expansion of the police department is part of the City Hall.
Yeah,
issue?
so we're gonna have, as maybe, I don't know how many Plan Commission members are aware, but we're going to be doing a large new building that will house the police department. That's kind of in the works right now. So what the capital facilities plan actually will do will kind of envision what can be used for the space that is currently occupied by the police department in City Hall. So, an expansion of City Hall, further expansion is probably not very likely in the near term because we will have space that will be vacated by the police department that we can backfill with other users. But we need to be able to look at what that space is in terms of, that's the oldest part of City Hall. I think it was constructed in 77. So, what upgrades would we need to do for that space and how flexible is that space to be used by other departments? Because it's got things like, a locker room and, storage for evidence and those kinds of things. And so, that's not something that most other departments need. So what can that space be used for once the police department moves out?
And just if I can add a little bit more, so it's a good opportunity to kind of segue into what that process for the new police station is going to look like. Right now, we've negotiated a tentative agreement with St. Martin's Abbey to potentially purchase property right adjacent to City Hall parking lot out just east of us. And so the next step is to start forming a citizen advisory committee to start analyzing the needs of the police department, the space, the cost, and talking about how this should go out to the voters, because this is ultimately going to need to be funded by a ballot measure to issue bonds and approved by the voters. So we're just beginning that process, and that Citizen Advisory Committee first meeting, I think, is targeted for the end of this month. Then that's the first step. And then as we go forward, we still have to develop building design, site design, all the architecture and engineering program. So that will help inform that Citizen Advisory Committee process, and then potentially look to go out to bond as soon as 2023. If the voters approve it, then we go into finalizing the purchase sale agreement with St. Martin's Abbey and move forward with the project. So stay tuned, because there'll be a lot of information about that process going forward. And the Citizen Advisory Committee is going to be made up of all aspects of our community, trying to get good representation both geographically and as well as the various perspectives around the table to provide feedback on this process. And you may have future reports at future planning commission meetings about that process as well.
One thing I was going to just mention as far as, this presentation goes is that obviously we called it the year of implementation, but you didn't see a lot of the implementation here because a lot of it doesn't necessarily touch the planning commission. And so that's something that we're going to reserve for the discussion with the council, or those other kind of department-wide things that we'll be working on to implement these various plans and initiatives. So things like, the police station expansion could be one, roundabout at 7th and College Street that will, create a great entrance to the Lacey Midtown, also, help our pedestrian connectivity in that area. Those are things that check a lot of our boxes as far as it does check multiple implementation items in multiple plans. And so, not only are we going to be talking about implementation items, but how many implementation items can help meet several goals all at the same time. Things like, so I mentioned that, things like energy retrofit program for existing, an audit and retrofit program for existing buildings. That checks, housing, needs as far as our housing strategy goes, but it also checks energy efficiency needs for our thirst and climate mitigation plan. So just to kind of give you a precursor of what we'll be talking about from an implementation standpoint, it'll be things like that. And we really will hit home that a lot of these implementation items are a good way to, for lack of a better term, kind of kill two birds with one stone. So, it's a way that we can achieve multiple objectives with one implementation item. Dave,
You're on mute, Dave.
Rookie mistake. Sorry. Hey, has there any more talk about a park district? Have we heard anything about that?
No, the Metropolitan Park District.
Yeah.
There isn't. It's still a tool out there available for the city to present or move forward. There's no plans to do that immediately right now. The Parks Department and the council is focused on master planning and development of Cuyo Park, as well as the museum project. Doesn't mean that the Metropolitan Parks District may not come back, but if it does, it'll probably go through a similar process as the police station. Forming a citizen advisory group, help get that information so that people are better informed before it goes out to ballot. The other challenge we have is there's so many different initiatives or proposals that are coming to the ballot to affect either property tax or sales tax, that trying to time something like that so it's not a burden on the taxpayers, but also the taxpayers don't get exhausted from all the various ballot measures too. So there's a lot of, not even city stuff, but school district, fire district, transit. There's all these different various ballot measures that are in existence or potentially coming forward.
So Cuyo Park is not in the city of Lacey, correct?
Portions of it is and portions of it isn't.
It's not also, which, really? I didn't realize that.
The
Okay.
majority of it.
There's
is.
two parks right there. Isn't there like two parks there?
Yep, we have Pleasant Glade Park and Cuyo Park, and they're all kind of part of the same park system. They're calling it a greenway, and so when it comes to, it's interesting, when it comes to annexations, we've already annexed the portions that we can. Even if it's property that's located outside of the city, if it's in the rural county, we can't legally annex it. So even though we own it, we are not under GMA, we can't annex property outside of an urban growth area. So there are portions at the very north end of the Cuyo Park property that are located in rural Thurston County that aren't, even though we own it, they're not part of the city limits.
So
But
about
the vast
75%,
majority is in the city.
yeah, 75%, 80% minimum of the park is in the city limits.
And the part that's going to be developed is going to be in the city.
Okay, and then there'd hopefully in the future could develop into the other one.
The other one is being Pleasant Glade.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's all being kind of master planned together. So when
Okay.
we say Cuyo Park, it's all part of that same greenway system that includes Pleasant
Okay.
Glade.
because there isn't any parks in Northeast Lacey, right? I mean, there's a little small community park.
Yeah, and if you
The
look at
Meridian Park.
our parks planning, so the Hawks Prairie planning area is the one that has the least amount of parks per capita. So that's a lot of it is because we have these master plan communities that have their own private open spaces and those kinds of things. And so we do have, even though we don't have a lot of city parks in that area, we do have a lot of open space. It just happens to be most of it is privately owned and maintained as by homeowners associations and those kinds of folks.
Sure. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Ryan?
All right, we'll see you next Thursday.
Communications and announcements. Remember, next Thursday, 27th, 6 o'clock. Also, our next planning meeting is February 1st. And I'm still thinking we're planning that that's going to be in a Zoom format.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments necessary?
It's going to be at 6 o'clock.
Oh,
No, 5 o'clock.
on our meeting?
Yeah.
Our meeting, I'm almost thinking since it's in the Zoom environment, we can be consistent with the 5 o'clock start and not switch to a 6 o'clock until we eventually move to a hybrid meeting, if that's okay with the rest of the commission.
Is that okay with everybody?
But the city council meeting is at 6.
Correct.
Okay.
On the 27th,
On the 27th.
that is at 6 o'clock. And I'm assuming we'll get some more information on that meeting.
Yes, we'll get packets. We'll send the copies of the agenda and the packets out to the planning commission in advance at the same time the council receives it.
Okay, great.
That'll probably be like on Friday. So I think the city council packets go out on Fridays.
All righty. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, commissioners and staff and everybody out
you,
there in
Rick.
the world that's watching.
Good night.
Have a good night. Keep practicing.
Yeah,
Good night, everyone.
night.